Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. We're talking Immaculate today. This is directed by Michael Mohan, a filmmaker who I am not familiar with whatsoever, but it does star Sydney Sweeney, who has been great in some things in the past, and I believe this is her first appearance as the lead in a horror film, which absolutely excited me. But you know what didn't excite me? The fact that she chose her first horror movie to be about nuns in a faith-based setting, something that we've seen so many times year after year, and you know what? These movies are very rarely good. And I try not to be pessimistic, but when the last couple of entries in this genre that made big bucks happened to be things like Consecration, Pray for the Devil, and The Nun, you just go in expecting the worst. But you know what? Against all odds, Immaculate was surprisingly decent. Now I say decent because this is not a great film. I don't think it's one of the best horror films of the last couple of months. I don't think it'll be in the running for the top horror film of the year. Absolutely not. But it's decent. And for this subgenre, I'll consider that a win. In Immaculate, Sweeney plays Cecilia, a young American nun who is moving to Italy to join a faction of other nuns and really embrace her faith and give her vows. And things don't turn out very well for her, based on the trailer, as you might have seen, with a lot of screaming and bloody violence. I promise you, both of those things are featured aplenty in this. Now, one of my biggest problems with these types of films is that they follow the tried and true tropes way too much. Crosses upside down, animals and birds reacting funny to things, exorcists coming in to get rid of demons and whatnot. And this does have some of that. There's a scene where a bird smacks into a window and tries to jump scare the audience, and I think that's really cheap, and I don't appreciate that this movie uses that. In fact, the first half as a whole contains a lot of cheap jump scares that were both predictable and annoying. I rolled my eyes multiple times. However, this movie also has a lot of strengths, many of which pertain to the second half, but getting back to the film as a whole, I think the cinematography is actually pretty strong here. The visuals are great. I love the tracking shots that follow Sydney Sweeney. The score is great too, almost giving me Argento vibes at times, and that might be a bit of a bold statement, and I don't want to compare this film to anything that guy made because, oh my gosh, just go watch his films if you haven't. I could go on a tangent about Deep Red and Suspiria all day, but that's not what we're talking about here, so let's try to stay on topic here. Technical elements as far as the directing, the shot composition, the editing, and the sound design, all fantastic, and there's some good body horror and gore in there that I didn't expect. Always nice to see some practical effects. As far as the story goes, it's a little weak in the first half. I just find a lot of it to be superficial, and this movie's 90 minutes, so I do appreciate that it's straight to the point. It doesn't waste your time trying to develop a bunch of side characters that don't matter. It uses its time wisely for the most part. And for a little while, it did keep me guessing as to what was going on, because Sydney Sweeney's character is a virgin, yet all of a sudden she becomes pregnant. And all of the people in this convent think that she's a miracle, and that this is a miracle baby, and it might be Jesus reincarnated. And as you can imagine, there are consequences to people believing that the opposite may be true, and this is the literal antichrist that she has inside of her. In the third act, there are a lot of reveals. Some of them are fantastic, and others I thought were just a little weak, or at least the execution was kind of dumb. Like when the main villain, so to speak, of the film starts talking and explaining what they're doing, I think it loses its effectiveness quite a bit. I wish they could have shown us what these people were doing instead of, just regurgitating it to the audience, because that's not how things work in real life, and it kind of cheapens the tension, if you will. However, they do a good job of getting you invested in Sydney Sweeney's character, making you feel for her, because she's in such a vulnerable position, being in a country where she doesn't speak the primary language very well at all. And throughout this film, you're not really sure who you can trust, who's on her side, and who has good intentions. And man, I'll tell you, Sweeney shines in that third act. There's been a lot of hype surrounding it. I heard before watching that the third act is the best part, and I agree with that. I don't want to overhype it because I think that's dangerous, but it is the strongest part of the movie. There's no denying that. And while the rest of it is very flawed, I can appreciate a film that builds to an ending, and the ending being its strongest part is not a bad thing at all. I want to be vague about details though, because this is a pretty straightforward movie, and part of the fun of it is seeing things unfold at the end and not really knowing exactly where it's going to go. But I'll just say the performance is fantastic, easily one of my favorites of the year so far. I would love to see Sydney Sweeney in more horror movies going forward. I wish she would maybe shy away from this subgenre though and do some other things. I don't want her to become the typecast nun in, shitty faith-based horror. The movie itself keeps things short, so I'm going to keep it short too. Immaculate gets a solid 3 out of 5 from me. Definitely a thumbs up, although, if you're not into horror whatsoever or you just absolutely hate faith-based horror movies, you're probably not going to like this. It's not going to win you over, but it's solid. It exceeded my expectations by quite a bit. That ending, it definitely will stick in my mind just because of how absolutely intense and unhinged it is. So if that's what you're looking for, people have been comparing this to the movie Saint Maud from a couple of years ago, and it does have a similar art house horror vibe to that, but it also does have some conventions that I talked about before. So I'm just trying to give you an idea of, if you're into this type of thing or not, based on things you've enjoyed in the past. So as always, do let me know in the comments if you see Immaculate, what you think of this. It premiered at South by Southwest and got mixed reviews, and the Rotten Tomatoes score has actually shot way up since then, which is very interesting and pretty uncommon. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Help me reach that 1,000 subs mark. We are getting pretty close. And as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.